On the 5th of July, 2005, 26-year-old George Smith IV went to sleep in his honeymoon suite aboard a luxury cruise ship sailing through the Mediterranean. And by morning, he was simply gone. But what the crew found on the side of that ship the next day, that is what nobody could explain away. So George was a 26-year-old guy from Greenwich, Connecticut, old money family. Sharp, well-liked, the kind of young man who genuinely had everything going for him. And he had just married his girlfriend, Jennifer. So this was their honeymoon. They were sailing the Mediterranean aboard a Royal Caribbean cruise ship called the Brilliance of the Seas. It should have been the most perfect week of their entire lives. Now here is what we know. On the night of the 5th of July, George was out at the ship's casino and bars with a group of passengers he had just met that evening. He was drinking heavily, way more than usual, and at some point deep into the early hours of the morning, he made his way back to the honeymoon cabin. And somewhere between that moment and sunrise, he went over the side. Because the next morning, a crew member noticed something on the exterior of the ship. There was a large, dark blood stain smeared across the canopy of a lifeboat. The overhang sitting directly below George and Jennifer's cabin balcony. George was gone. Jennifer had been found hours earlier completely unconscious, passed out drunk and alone in a hallway on a completely different deck from their room with no memory of the night before. And then the details that started slowly coming out, they were deeply unsettling. Multiple passengers reported hearing a loud thud coming from George's cabin in the middle of the night, followed by voices. At least 3 other young men, passengers George had been drinking with that same night, were reported seen leaving his cabin in the early hours. Turkish authorities investigated. The FBI investigated, those men were questioned, and not one single person was ever charged, not one George's mother. This extraordinary woman, she refused to let it die. She went to the United States Congress, she sat in front of senators, and she testified, and she pushed until actual laws were changed about how crimes committed on cruise ships get investigated. She got the law changed. But the one thing she could never get was the truth about what actually happened inside that cabin on the last night of her son's honeymoon. George Smith IV's body was never recovered. The Mediterranean took him completely, and whoever was in that room with him in those final hours has never answered for a single second of it. Subscribe right now, because I've got dozens more stories just like George's, and some of them have endings even darker than this one.